and thank you for coming to Gender Dynamics in Health and Safety. I'm Sonia Gupta, Director of Sustainability for Dundee Precious Metals, and also Women in Mining Canada board member. And together with our board, we're really excited to bring this session to you today. This is something that I've actually been thinking about for a long time, and it's an idea that came from an experience I had at an industry meeting that I was at probably about a year ago. And I asked the question of, there were many mining companies in the room, and I asked them a question: have you guys, your company, have you started thinking about how to integrate gender into your health and safety programs? Of course, with the mostly male participants in the room, I was met with equal parts confusion as well as blank stares. And then finally, an individual asked, well, what does thinking about gender have anything to do with preventing fatalities? And yes, and I had that shocked look on my face as well, which is why this conversation is really important. And, thankfully, there are companies and there are people out there that have been thinking about this, and they're here with us today. So what are we going to do? We're going to start with a keynote speaker, Nancy, who will be focusing on really the why of this issue and why it's really important for companies to start thinking about it. And then we're going to transition quickly over to panelists where you'll hear about some stories and experiences that companies have had along their safety journey. So thank you again for coming today. We are going to have a moderated Q&A at the end of the panel, so please stick around and ask many questions at that time. So we're going to start with our keynote, Nancy Wilk. We're very excited and privileged to have Nancy with us today. Nancy is the Senior Technical Director of EHS and Industrial Hygiene for WSP. She is also the President and current Board Chair of the International Occupational Hygiene Association. So hopefully I got that right. Thank you so much for joining us, Nancy, and could you please join us on the stage?
Good day, and thank you. And Dan, can you hear me at the back with the mic? Great, thanks. This is indeed an important conversation and key to supporting women in mining. Gender dynamics in mining health and safety practices. Well done, and thank you to Women in Mining Canada. And as for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, a topic with diminishing forums, again, I say well done and thank you. We need new strategies for better support of women in mining, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, for occupational health and safety issues, and for mining workplace culture, research, and guidance. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. I want to set the context by noting the very rich history of women in mining, one with active and significant roles. Between the 16th and 18th century, women around the globe worked in gold, diamond, and coal mining on surface and underground. Toward the end of the 18th century in Europe, women were increasingly excluded from mining. In the mid-19th century, the UK passed the Mines and Collieries Act of 1842, excluding women, and the approach spread. This changed mining from a traditional family labor system into an industry deemed unsuitable for women. In the early 1900s, the International Labour Organization, or ILO, imposed additional conventions excluding women as underground miners internationally. Women were forced out of well-paying jobs and into jobs of lower status and lower wage work than men. In 1975, the ILO reversed this course and concluded that the laws served as significant barriers for women's participation in economic life, depriving women of equal opportunity and treatment due to discrimination in employment and occupation. According to the World Bank, as of 2020, 60 countries still had laws restricting women's employment in mining. A 2023 Global Intergovernmental Forum, something I'll cite throughout my presentation as the IGF report, on women and the mine of the future, reported that mining is one of the most masculinized sectors. In 2021, the ILO reported that of 21.4 million workers employed globally in mining, 85% were men. As recent as 2022, there are reports of sexual harassment and gender-based violence from across geographies and organizations. Reports of women not being safe as they are confronted with blatant and normalized discrimination and bullying within macho workplace cultures. The article cited a 2022 Global Mining Companies report revealing a workplace culture of sexual harassment, bullying, and racism. This toxic culture is not unique to that one company. There is a dark side to women in mining. Aspects of mining culture that we all have a responsibility to acknowledge, identify, eliminate, and create inclusive and safe workplace cultures. And until this happens, there will be low participation and low retention of women in mining. Note in 2020, the Mining Association of Canada and its members issued a statement that denounced all forms of discrimination, racism, and sexism. And in 2022, this statement was used as inspiration for MAC's protocol, Equitable, Diverse, and Inclusive Workplaces, in its TSM program. Let's take a closer look at the IGF report. You can see here that the representation of gender within 12 countries participating in the IGF Women and the Mine of the Future project. The data sources for the pie chart distributions on the right are noted, and the bar graphs on the left demonstrate the gender distribution for 7 of the 12 countries. You will see that a significant share of employment is held by men. And next to construction, mining has the lowest percentage of women for almost every jurisdiction reported here. So why does diversity and inclusion matter to mining? Well, beyond upholding values of equality and equity, research shows that diversity and gender balance are associated with improved financial and operating performance. Diverse teams are reported to be more productive and to have safer work practices. Diversity promotes creativity and innovation. It promotes strategic resilience, and mining companies need this to successfully meet the challenges facing the industry today, from digital and analytics disruption to sustainability, decarbonization, and the transition to the green economy. There is an imperative to attract and harness the capabilities of a broad, diverse labor pool, and this should lead mining companies to recruit and retain more women and invest in their inclusion, their skills, and their success. And if that's not convincing enough for you, consider this value proposition. Investors tend to favor companies that can help them to achieve their ESG goals, which encompass diversity within organizations and in the communities in which they work and live. So what are some of the pressures and barriers identified by the IGF project? Mining's boom and bust cycle, that nature, tends to impact women more than men, resulting in loss of jobs and livelihoods. For local communities, mining is often the largest, if not the only, formal employer to which they have access. The sector offers significant direct and indirect mining jobs, particularly for women in these communities. Women's employment in the mining sector is critical for the economic empowerment of women. The sexist biases and masculinized culture have been mentioned already. Facilities at mine sites are not conducive for women's employment. Facilities and equipment, the fly-in, fly-out or FIFO model for mines located in remote areas, are not adapted to the needs of women. Strategies and corporate measures are lacking to meet women's needs for basic personal protective equipment, safe and separate facilities, and gender-appropriate health services. Women are underrepresented at every level in mining, in professional, managerial, and leadership groups, along with trades and operations. Women find it hard to obtain mining-specific skills and education, and they often have less on-the-job training and apprenticeship opportunities than men. Women in STEM prefer other industries over mining. Women are leaving mining due to the type of work, non-inclusive environments, unsupported parenting, and lack of growth. And despite having higher education in mining, women earn lower wages than men. In 2024, Lancet Public Health published a global study revealing stark differences between females and males in major causes of disease burden, underscoring the need for gender-responsive approaches to health. This is consistent with the IGF 2023 Global Report on Women in Mine of the Future, stating an extreme lack of consistent, detailed, and comparable data sets and in-depth analysis regarding the status of employment by gender in mining. Unfortunately, similar gaps exist for occupational health hazards for women. There is a dearth of research, standards, and guidance related to occupational health hazards and exposures that pose risk of injury, illness, and harm for women, and this is the reality for women in mining. Largely, women are not included in the research that is required to support effective risk assessment and mitigation and the practice of occupational health and safety. And as stated by one of the senior leaders in my organization, without inclusion, there is no diversity. We need to include women in occupational health research. This includes potential exposures to chemicals and physical agents, psychosocial factors, and mental health. Mining is a very high-risk industry with regards to mental health. Let's take a closer look. Within the Canadian Standard on Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace, this was published in 2013, there is a comprehensive list of factors to assess as part of a systematic and comprehensive approach. The factors are listed here and include psychological support, organizational culture, civility and respect, growth and development. Take a good look at this list. One could change the title of this slide and you would have a pretty good list of attributes of an inclusive culture, don't you think? Given the historical information that is available and the current experience of women in mining, for women in mining, many of these factors would be rated as or assessed as not present or very weak, meaning women in mining do not work within cultures that are supportive, responsive, caring, free of psychological harm, or likely to retain women. This standard on psychological health and safety at work recognizes that workplaces with a positive approach to psychological health and safety are better able to recruit and retain talent, have improved employee engagement, enhance productivity, and are more creative and innovative, and they have higher profit levels. A British Occupational Hygiene Society report in 2023 points to urgent need for measures to protect women from becoming ill due to work. The report indicates that more women than men suffer from worsened health due to exposures at work. The report highlights that women carry more of the burden of occupational disease than men, and that there is an alarming gap in the monitoring, measuring, and reporting of the true problem, and notes that immediate action is needed to address this crisis. There is need for additional research, standards, and guidance. Mining is facing fundamental change due to global megatrends such as rapid technological advances, growing pressure to mine more responsibly and equitably, and rising demand for minerals and metals for the low-carbon transition. These trends have significant implications for governance, mine businesses, structure and operations, and for stakeholders, including workers, their families, and communities. Changing work, changing workplace conditions, and change itself can become stressors for the worker. This reality needs to be resiliently managed and balance achieved. Global megatrends and macro-environmental drivers are expected to impact men and women differently. Mining needs to overcome the barriers and potential for attracting and retaining women to work in the mines of the future. To better understand those impacts and the opportunities, more data and analysis are needed, and the current state of play of representation of women in mining in the workforce needs to be thoroughly analyzed. As an industrial hygienist, my focus area is occupational health. My WSP colleague, Courtney Jean-John, and I have spoken in several forums on this topic of supporting women in mining, diversity and inclusion, and reproductive health and birth outcomes. I will share some of this here. We speak to this topic because we receive requests to conduct reproductive health exposure assessments in mining, As well, we are women in mining with related life experience, and the mining sector is committed to diversity and inclusion and improving gender balance. There is a void of research, standards, and guidance on occupational health hazards for women. One reason is that the majority of occupational health research is based on reference man, someone who is 25 to 30 years, Caucasian, and weighs 70 kilos. This reference man does not represent women nor most of humanity. The concept that a woman's body does not equal a man's body may seem an obvious one. Women are smaller on average and have different reproductive systems, but historically, it has been thought that other than these two items, the female and male body are fundamentally the same. It turns out they are not. Researchers report sex differences in every tissue and organ system in the human body, as well as the prevalence, course, and severity of most common human diseases. Differences in immune systems, hormones, skin thickness, body size, and fat all play a role in how chemicals are absorbed and metabolized by women and need to be factored into the level of toxins to which women can be safely exposed. The changes in a pregnant woman's body make her more susceptible to potential hazards as she deviates even further from this reference man and from the related occupational health limits and guidance. It is noted that women are routinely excluded or underrepresented from health research. This is because the male's body is seen as default and the woman's body as unique. This is, of course, not the case. The two are simply different. In animal studies, a 2014 paper found that 22% of studies did not specify sex, and of those that did, 80% included male animals only in the study. This is exacerbated in male-dominated industries such as mining, where research often removes women as they are considered confounding factors. Future research needs to disaggregate data by sex and include a represented percentage of women where possible. A final note that occupational health standards and guidance do not normally account for the health of the fetus. Some definitions here. Reproductive hazards are agents that can adversely affect reproductive health of women and men or negatively impact the development of a fetus. Examples include infertility, miscarriage, premature labor. Note the focus here is on women's reproductive hazards. However, there are reproductive hazards for men. A teratogen is an agent that interferes with normal fetal development and can cause birth defects. As a precaution, teratogens should include mutagens and carcinogens as the fetus is undergoing rapid development. Based on our work, we identified 8 reproductive hazards to the mining workplace. The information in the next couple slides is taken from an excellent resource from Laurentian University Center for Research in Occupational Health and Safety and the Guide for Healthy Pregnancies in the Mining Workplace. For each, I'll just go back. Those include noise, heat stress, ionizing radiation, whole body vibration, lead, stress, ergonomics, and scheduling. For each of the reproductive hazards listed here, the risk to the fetus and the mother are noted, along with recommended control measures. Only 2 of the 8 reproductive hazards we identified have prescribed standards under legislation or established guidance in codes that apply to the pregnant worker and their reproductive health. If you would like more information on this, please reach out to me and I'm happy to share. We have time to look at one example, vibration. Occupational exposure limits for vibration are not prescribed in Canadian legislation, and generally data is lacking on whole body vibration exposure assessments. We received a request to assess a pregnant miner's risk of exposure to whole body vibration. They worked in a mill control room and were exposed to vibration from adjacent machinery. We found this to be a difficult case to assess as there is a lack of research in this area and a subsequent lack of guidance values. Controls for the pregnant worker include keeping whole body vibration to a minimum or applying the ALARA principle as low as reasonably achievable, avoid vibrations at the frequency of the spine, that's 10 to 12 hertz, and avoid vibrations at the frequency of the uterus, 8 hertz. While our aim is to provide technical support that can identify protective controls that the worker can be protected by to remain in their assigned job, the assessment recommended the worker be removed from the work and reassigned where possible due to the lack of information and in applying the ALARA recommendation and precautionary principle. An important control is protective reassignment with specific responsibilities placed on the employer and the worker. regarding reasonable accommodation, duty to notify, risk assessment, and modified duties. It is recommended that the worker talks to a healthcare provider and the site medical services about their job and potential exposures. The ILO publication here on parental leave is a reminder that this is another area that often has related stigma and anxiety. We have work to do in mining to affect important cultural change. Regarding culture and workplace preparation, we learned of a worker that had had a miscarriage at a FIFO mine site. The woman was in her first trimester, and the site was not aware that she was pregnant. The experience of having a miscarriage can be traumatic, and was additionally so as the site was not prepared to support the worker, and she had to be medically evacuated by air. This experience may have been less traumatic had she felt comfortable disclosing her pregnancy to the medical team on site. This is not an easy thing to do, but there are things we can do to make this easier for women, including talking about pregnancy, preparing for emergency situations with our medical teams on site, and having policies and procedures in place to support women in these situations. So what are the opportunities? Despite changing commitments to diversity, equity, inclusion presently, we need to stay the course. Strengthen DEI and strengthen workplace culture. Please stay the course. Women are a key part of mining's human capital. Mining needs to attract, support, and retain women in their workplace. To do this, it is imperative that workplace policies and procedures are established and supported at every level. Mining can drive research into women's health and specific occupational hazards. There needs to be strong leadership support and engagement to affect change. Training and awareness are required at every organizational level. Workplaces, including FIFO sites, need to provide adequate medical services to meet the needs of women. All of the items we have talked about today must be integrated into management systems, progress monitored, and change implemented where needed. Other relevant forums, and I will add I had to change this slide since I prepared, given all the moving information about this topic. Check out the work of Andrea Carter on inclusion and the sense of belonging. The sense of belonging is tied to mental health and mental health, physical health. Mental health in Canadian mining has shown strong progress with great research by Vallée and Laurentian University. And examples of site programs such as Agnico Eagles digging deep at their Detour Lake site. These have been written up in the CIM magazine publication. In 2023, the BHP Jansen site in Saskatchewan achieved gender balance. If you like podcasts, visit the Healthy Workplace Show podcast on trailblazing women for an open and straightforward conversation on DEI. The National Safety Council 2024 publication on DEI and safety provides good guidance for operationalizing DEI-informed safety approaches. The SME 2024 text, Mine Safety Handbook, Approaches from the Field, provides a chapter on occupational risks of underrepresented populations in mining. Finally, the International Occupational Hygiene Association, in its January Global Exposure Manager newsletter, features an article on supporting women in mining. These are my list of references. Please reach out if you'd like a copy. In closing, I'd like to say thank you to the Women in Mining Canada, to Sonia, to the panel represented here, to WSP and my colleagues contributing to this work, and to you for taking this important commitment forward and working to best support women in the mining sector. Thank you.
Nancy, for that. So Nancy has graciously offered to stay and join us during our moderated Q&A with the panel. But if there are any burning questions for Nancy, we'd like to give you an opportunity to ask that now. There is a question mic right here at the front of the room.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
My name is Sakai, and I'm also a member of the board here with Women in Mining Canada. And my day job, I work with BHP at the Jansen site that has gender balance. My question for you is, towards the beginning of your presentation, you had a nice little timeline. And maybe I missed it. I was trying to pay attention, but I don't know in your research or in your readings if before that Collier's, I think it was the Collier's Act?
Mines and Colliers
Mines and
Act,
Colliers Act in 1975.
1842.
1842?
Yeah.
Okay, I made up that number, that date. Do you have any insights that you found about the demographics of, or the participation of women in mining prior to that? And when that was, I think 1975 was when it was reverted then, because I'm pretty sure I saw that number. But so when, kind of the comparison between what our participation was like before that act was put in place, and then and how that kind of has ramped up since it was revoked or turned around. I don't know if my question was clear.
Yeah, I can speak to a few things. This presentation or keynote is actually an hour, so I didn't want to leave too much out, but with regards to the history of women in mining, that rich history that I wanted to note was around the active and significant roles. Women did carry out heavy labor work, both underground and on surface and around the globe. I mean, I cited some of the geographies there. But with that, it was a very important source of income for a family. Women, it was important to their economic success. And with that change, it's been such a slow time in recovering. But the Intergovernmental Forum has a lot of good history on it as well.
I guess I find that very fascinating in 2025 when I get into rooms and there's this idea, because the reason I asked the question is that I have read that history as well, and when I read it, I was preparing for a presentation last year for our Win-Win conference at My New Potential in Saskatchewan. And what I found interesting was that there's some places where there was 60% participation in some of the stuff that I found in my readings, that women were actively participating underground and everywhere else. And now when you look at Canada, we're 10%, 10, 12. I think there's a time where we hit 15% across Canada. And it fascinates me today that back then when there was so much less HSE, health and safety, policies, and there was way less technology, way less things to help you lift heavy things, women were there and they were participating 50% and sometimes more. And now in 2025, we have all of this technology, all of these safety policies, all of this stuff that should be able to enable women to participate. And I go into a lot of places and they're like, wow, it's just a man's job. You just don't have the strength, the upper body strength that a man does, and all of this. And it makes me chuckle a little bit when, in the past, we did participate and it worked well with families and so on.
Yeah, so of those, a couple of things that I'll comment on, of those 60 countries that are in the 2020 World Bank, and that seems old now, 2020, but they haven't updated it. I checked in preparing. Most of those are in the sub-Saharan region. There's quite a cultural impact there in terms of what's acceptable. But to your point about the fluctuating percentages that we see, I think we need to pay attention to, yes, we want to attract more women to mining, but we need to prepare our organizations so we retain them. Because you'll see that 2023 report, and it's the second of 3 reports that will be issued by the Intergovernmental Forum. So the other one should be forthcoming. This is a global report. Each of the 12 countries have their country report as well. But this is the second of the 3rd global. The strategies there, we need to put those in place so we keep women. And the statistic in that 2023 report for Canada was 19%. We fluctuate terribly from that, and it's because we can sometimes attract people, but we can't keep them, and for a number of the reasons that you just cited. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I mentioned Nancy will be sticking around to the end, so if we have any more questions for her, there'll be an opportunity to ask any additional. Thank you so much.